My name is Susan Miller, and I'm 72 years old. For a full decade, I was the silent force that kept my son's family functioning. Every lunchbox I prepared, every fever I comforted, every late night lullaby I hummed. All of it was my responsibility. Last Sunday, over a dinner of tender roasted potatoes and a bakery bought dessert, my son, David, and his wife, Emily, announced they were expecting their fifth child. I managed to keep my smile in place as a heavy feeling settled in my chest. Then they asked me to contribute to their monthly rent. They reasoned that I was already at their house in Portland, Oregon for a significant portion of the week anyway. At that very moment, everything within me shifted. I glanced around the dining table at the grandchildren I had nurtured as if they were my own. I cherished them deeply. Yet I could feel the tremendous burden of 10 years pressing down on my shoulders. My hands were achy, my back ached persistently, and my savings were nearly depleted. In that moment, I understood that if I didn't make a choice for myself right then, I might never get the chance. So I made a firm decision. I would no longer be the family's unpaid caregiver or their financial safety net. For the first time in many years, I selected myself. When my husband passed away, I believed the most challenging chapter of my life had concluded. I had envisioned retirement as a season of peaceful mornings, a bit of gardening, and perhaps some trips with my friend Carol to admire the Rocky Mountains. Instead, I became the anchor for David's household. He spent his long days working in construction, and Emily worked late shifts at the medical center. They were constantly exhausted, perpetually stretched thin, and before I knew it, their 4 children were in my care more often than in theirs. Initially, I convinced myself it was a temporary arrangement, just a few months to help them get a solid start, but the months turned into years, and a routine became established. I was the one who woke the children for school, helped with their assignments, and tucked them into their beds at night. Their boisterous laughter filled my small home, their toys cluttered the floor, and their needs dictated my schedule. I have no regrets about the love I gave them, not for an instant. Chloe learned to read while nestled on my lap. Ben constructed his first science fair project with me at the kitchen table. Leo and I planted marigolds together one spring morning, and little Daisy would never fall asleep without hearing me sing her favorite lullabies. But somewhere along the way, my own existence quietly vanished. My quilting group at the community hall continued their meetings without me, the walking club enjoyed their strolls in the park without me, and the pile of books on my bedside table simply accumulated dust. My universe had gradually shrunk to accommodate their requirements. It was a Sunday afternoon when the pivotal change occurred. David and Emily invited me over for dinner, which was a rare occurrence. The table was set with unusual attention to detail. Roast potatoes steamed in a serving dish, green beans gleamed with butter, and a beautiful cake was waiting on the counter. I thought perhaps this was their way of showing gratitude, a small gesture to acknowledge the years I had dedicated to them. The children were their usual vibrant selves. Chloe, now 15, was trying to prevent her younger brothers from spilling the juice. Ben was tapping his fork against his plate, eager for dessert. Leah was whispering jokes that made Daisy giggle so hard she nearly tipped her chair. Amidst the cheerful noise, I smiled, feeling weary but proud. I had been present for every important moment. Science fairs, spelling bees, playground scrapes, and bedtime tears. In countless ways, these children felt like my very own. Then Emily placed her fork down and exchanged a glance with David, that knowing look that only couples share, the one that says, "It's time." David gently tapped his glass as if preparing to make a toast. "Mom," he began, his eyes gleaming, "we have wonderful news. Baby number 5 is on the way." The children erupted in excited questions. "A new baby? When is it due? Is it a boy or a girl?" Emily leaned back, her hand resting on her stomach, radiating contentment. David beamed as if he had just won a grand prize. And me? My smile remained fixed, but inside my heart plunged. A fifth baby. Another round of endless diapers, bottles, and sleepless nights. I had already given up my quilting evenings, my walking group, and even the little getaways I had once dreamed of. I wish I could applaud along with the children, but instead a knot tightened in my stomach because I knew precisely what this meant. They would need me more than ever. A couple of evenings later, David asked me to stay after the kids were tucked into bed. His tone was deliberate, almost as if he had rehearsed the words. Emily sat beside him at the kitchen table, her arms crossed, her gaze steady. I had a premonition that something was about to happen, but I was unprepared for what he said next.
Mom, David began, with the new baby arriving, our finances are going to be strained. You're here so much of the time already. The kids rely on you. Maybe it's time to formalize things? I furrowed my brow. Formalize? Emily chimed in. Yes, formalize. You could take charge of the school runs, the dinners, the laundry. You practically live here half the week already. She paused before dropping the bombshell. And it would be a huge help if you could contribute a little for rent and groceries, just a couple of $100 each month. The room seemed to spin. My modest pension barely covered my own house, my utilities, my medications. I had already been purchasing shoes for their kids when they outgrew them, paying for field trips and slipping boxes of cereal into my shopping cart for their pantry. Now they wanted me to pay them too? I tried to keep my voice steady. You know I'm on a fixed income. I already provide a lot of assistance with the children and cover expenses whenever I can. Emily's voice took on a sharper edge. You share our meals. You utilize the house. It's only fair. That word, fair, felt like a blow. Was it fair that my hands were raw from washing dishes, my back was sore from lifting, and my savings had been drained by their demands? I pressed my lips together, the quiet between us heavier than any household chore. In that silence, I knew that something had to change. The next morning unfolded just like every other. My cell phone buzzed before the sun rose with a text from Chloe. "Grandma, can you come? Mom's running behind again." I set down my half-empty mug of coffee and drove across town. The kitchen was utter chaos when I arrived. Bowls with dried cereal were scattered across the counter. Milk had pooled on the floor where it had been spilled. Ben was digging through a pile of clothes for a clean pair of socks, while Leo rummaged through the refrigerator for something sugary. Little Daisy was clinging to my leg in her pajamas, her hair a tangled mess. I dropped my purse and went into autopilot. Sandwiches were assembled, juice boxes were filled, and apples were sliced. I ironed Ben's shirt while reminding Leo to brush his teeth. I braided Daisy's hair and tied her shoes. By 8 o'clock, I had herded them all into the car and was on my way to their school. The drive was a noisy affair. Chloe complained about a history project. Ben tapped a pencil on the window. Leo rattled off questions about baseball, and Daisy hummed softly. I kept one hand on the steering wheel and the other wrapped around my travel mug, as if the coffee were the only thing holding me together. By the time I returned to the house, the laundry pile resembled a small mountain. I sorted, washed, folded, matched socks, scrubbed dishes, and vacuumed crumbs. The dishwasher ran twice before noon. My back ached and my hands were stiff, but I kept moving. When the sun began to set that evening, I had fed the children, supervised their homework, calmed their little fits, and tucked them into bed. The house appeared tranquil, but inside, I felt utterly drained, emptied by yet another day that belonged to everyone but me. That evening, I drove back to my own little house. As I pulled into my driveway, I saw my neighbor, Carol, sitting on her porch swing with a glass of iced tea. She waved me over. You look like you've been carrying the weight of the world, she said, shifting to make room for me. I sank onto the swing beside her, the cool evening air a relief on my face. And then, as if a dam had broken, the words came pouring out. I told her about David and Emily wanting another baby, about the chores that consumed every hour of my day, and about their new request for money. My voice faltered when I admitted how invisible I felt, like a servant who worked for free. Carol listened without a word. When I finally stopped, she leaned back and shook her head. Susan, you raised your children. You did your duty. This is no longer your job. Her words resonated like a bell in my chest. I had whispered them to myself before, but hearing them spoken aloud made them impossible to ignore. The next day, I drove to the public library. I told David I had errands to run, but in truth, I just needed some space to think. I found a computer in a quiet corner and typed in senior apartments near me. Dozens of listings appeared. Most were too costly, $1,100, $1,200 a month, far more than my pension would allow. But nestled among them were a few income-based options. If I managed my money carefully, it might be possible. I scribbled phone numbers and addresses into my notebook. The simple act of writing them down felt like planting a seed of hope. Before I left, I stopped by the bulletin board near the entrance. Flyers covered the cork. Cashier at the grocery store, front desk aide at the senior center, after-school tutoring for kids. None promised much, but even a few extra $100 could tip the scales in my favor. On the drive home, I imagined myself unlocking the door to a space that was mine and no one else's. No to-do lists waiting on the counter, no late-night cries I had to soothe, just a quiet sense of peace. That night, I sat at my kitchen table, calculating numbers in my notebook. For the first time in years, instead of figuring out how to stretch my savings for someone else, I was daring to envision a life for myself.
The following Friday, Emily casually mentioned they were hoping for a night out. "You'll stay over, won't you? We'll be back late," she said, speaking as if my compliance were a given. For many years, I would have simply nodded, rescheduled my own plans, and packed an overnight bag without a second thought. But this time, I met her gaze directly. My voice was calm and steady. "No, Emily, I won't be able to stay the night anymore. I'll help out in the afternoons, but I need my evenings to myself." The silence that followed was sharp. Her eyebrows shot up as if my words were a physical blow. "What do you mean you can't?" she demanded. I just shook my head. "Not anymore. I have to start looking out for myself." That same evening, Chloe lingered by the laundry hamper while her siblings ran off to their rooms. She fidgeted with a folded shirt before asking in a hushed voice, "Grandma, are you going to leave us?" The question was a dagger to my heart. I pulled her into a hug. "Oh, honey, no. I will always be here for you." "But being here doesn't always have to mean living under the same roof." She sniffled and nodded slowly. I kissed her forehead. "You'll never lose me, Chloe. But I also have to take care of me, too." Her arms squeezed me tightly, as if she understood more than any adult ever could. The true breaking point came one evening when I arrived to pick up Chloe from her choir practice. As we pulled into the driveway, David was standing on the porch, his arms crossed and his face flushed with anger. Emily hovered just behind him, her lips a thin, hard line. "Mom, we need to have a serious talk," David said before I had even gotten out of the car. Inside the kitchen, a white envelope sat on the counter. Emily pointed to it like it was a piece of evidence. "We had $300 in here. It's gone." She paused, her voice laced with accusation. "And it disappeared right after you started packing your suitcase." My stomach plummeted. "You think I took your money?" David's eyes narrowed. "You're the only one who's been around. If you were in need of help, you could have just asked. You didn't have to steal." Heat rushed to my face. "I would never, ever steal from you."
I have been the one buying your groceries, your children's shoes, and their school supplies for years. You both know that." Emily's voice sharpened. "Then explain where it went." David added coldly, "Maybe we should just call the police. Let them figure it out." Those words almost shattered me. My own son threatening me with the police after everything I had given them? My throat's constricted. No words would come out. Then out of nowhere, Chloe's voice cut through the tension. She stood in the doorway, pale but steady. "Grandma didn't take anything. She's the only one who ever gives us stuff." Chloe's voice was full of righteous indignation. "I saw Mom put that envelope in her purse last week after she went to the store. Don't say you forgot." The room fell into a heavy silence. Emily's face turned scarlet, but she said nothing. David shifted uncomfortably. Finally, I found my voice. "I don't deserve this. I have given you everything I could, and now you accuse me of stealing?" I picked up my purse and walked out the door. Chloe's brave words echoed in my ears, but so did David's threat. That was the night I knew I could never go back. Back at my own little house, I pulled a suitcase from the back of my closet and set it in the corner of my bedroom. For the next few days, I didn't pack much, just a few items that held special meaning for me. My quilting needles, a framed photograph of my husband and I on our wedding day, and a small Bible that had belonged to my mother. These were the pieces of my life that reminded me who I was before I became everyone's caretaker. I didn't announce anything to David or Emily. I had no interest in another confrontation. But even the quiet act of slipping a sweater into that suitcase felt like a powerful declaration. This was my choice, and no one could take it from me.
A week later, Emily appeared at my front door, her arms folded, her eyes hard. "So it's true," she said flatly. "You're really planning on leaving?" I met her gaze directly. "Yes, I need my own space." "You're choosing yourself over your family?" she snapped. I wanted to tell her the truth, that I was choosing to live without the bitter regret I already felt for the years I had lost, but instead, I kept my voice calm. "I will always be their grandmother, but I won't be your maid." Her lips tightened, and without another word, she turned and walked away. I stood in my doorway, my suitcase visible in the corner, finally certain of my next step. A week later, I signed the lease for a one-bedroom apartment on the edge of town. It wasn't much, just a small kitchen, a narrow living room, and a balcony just big enough for a couple of pots of flowers. But it was mine. For the first time in years, I turned a key in a lock that belonged only to me. I furnished it with secondhand finds, a used table, two mismatched chairs, and a lamp with a wobbly shade. On that table, I placed my husband's photo, and in the corner sat my quilting bag, patiently waiting for my hands. At night, the silence felt heavy at first, but slowly it began to feel like a deep comfort. No shouts for help with homework, no mountains of laundry, just me, a cup of tea, and the stillness. I found a part-time job at the senior center answering phones, and suddenly my days had a natural rhythm again. During lunch breaks, I shared coffee with people my own age who laughed at the same old jokes I did. On Thursday nights, I rejoined the quilting circle at church. The women clapped and hugged me as if no time had passed at all. The guilt lingered, whispering that I had abandoned my family. But each morning, when I watered the geraniums on my small balcony, I knew I had chosen survival, not selfishness. One Tuesday afternoon, my phone rang. I almost let it go to voicemail, but something compelled me to pick up. "Mom?" David's voice was tight, nearly panicked. "It's Emily. She's at the hospital, some complications with the pregnancy. The doctor says she needs to be on complete bed rest for weeks, maybe even months. The kids are falling apart. I don't know what to do." For a moment, I couldn't breathe. After everything, the arguments, the accusations, the threat of calling the police, he was calling me again. Part of me wanted to simply hang up and let him figure it out, But then I thought of Chloe trying to keep order, Ben scrambling for clean clothes, Leo wandering for snacks, and little Daisy clinging to whoever would hold her. I took a deep breath. I'll help, David, but only on my terms. There was a long pause on the line. What do you mean? I'll be there after school. I'll cook simple meals. I'll make sure the kids stay steady, but I am not moving back in. I am keeping my apartment, and this is only for 3 months. After that, you and Emily take back your responsibilities. I could almost hear his jaw clench. Finally, he muttered, Fine, 3 months. The next day, I drove over after my morning coffee. The house looked like a storm had passed through. Books were scattered, dishes were piled high, and shoes littered the hallway. The kids rushed toward me, relief written all over their faces. It's going to be all right, I told them, gathering them in a hug. But listen, this has to be a team effort. Chloe, you'll help Ben with his homework. Ben, you'll take out the trash. Leo, you'll set the table. Daisy, napkins are your job. They blinked at me, uncertain at first, but when they started moving, I saw something new in their eyes, a glimmer of responsibility, a touch of pride. It wasn't perfect, but it was a start. Over the weeks that followed, I kept my promise. I helped, but I no longer carried every burden myself. Instead of doing all the chores, I began teaching the children how to do them. One evening, Chloe and I stood side by side at the stove. I cracked the first egg into a pan, then handed her the next one. Your turn, I said. She wrinkled her nose but carefully tapped the shell. When the eggs slid into the skillet, she laughed in surprise. By the time she flipped them onto a plate, her face glowed with pride. That wasn't so hard, she whispered. Ben grumbled the first time I showed him how to load the washing machine. Why do I have to do? But when he pulled out a stack of clean shirts later and folded them himself, I caught the small smile he tried to hide. Leo's job was setting the table. He treated it like an art project, lining up forks and napkins in perfect rows. Little Daisy learned to put her crayons in a box instead of scattering them across the floor. It wasn't flawless. The eggs were sometimes runny. The laundry was folded crookedly. The dog was fed twice in one day and not at all the next. But the children were learning. They were stepping into the roles their parents had left vacant. And with each small success, I felt lighter. I wasn't just holding them up anymore. I was showing them how to stand tall on their own. By the time autumn arrived, Emily had delivered a healthy baby boy, Jack. I visited the hospital once, mostly for the children's sake. Chloe held her new brother with care, Ben peeked over her shoulder, Leo stood on tiptoe, and Daisy beamed with wonder. I congratulated David and Emily, kissed the baby's forehead, and quietly left. When Emily returned home, the chaos only intensified, but this time I did not step back into my old role. My 3 months were finished, and I had kept my word. I still visited, still loved, and still listened to late-night phone calls from Chloe, but I no longer gave up my life to hold theirs together. I raised my son. It was never my job to raise his. Love is not surrender. It is balance.